Hello, I'm Min Kobayashi, and today I'm going to be bringing my 5 favorite London adult books. And this isn't going to include any science fiction or fantasy. Those are going to be left for a different video. This video will include 2 contemporaries and 3 historical fictions. And I'm really excited because these were books that I absolutely loved and I can't wait to talk about. So without further ado, my favorite book of this year was Dear Martin by Nick Stone. It is incredible. I don't necessarily have words to explain all the things that is in this book that make me so happy. The plot goes as this. We have the main character who is Justice McAlister, and he is a black man who is in his senior year, and at the beginning of the book he is at a party with his ex-girlfriend who is biracial, and she's drunk and trying to drive, and he stops her, puts her in the back, and takes her keys away in order to keep her from driving intoxicated. And a cop pulls her over believing that he is trying to rape her. And without questions or anything like that, he's arrested. And as much as I am happy that, for action of women's protection, it is definitely because she can pass for white and he very much is black. He decides, rather than becoming angry or irritated, that he is going to fuel this frustration at our world into notes and letters to Martin Luther King Jr. And I think that that was such a beautiful decision to show such power through him rechanneling this aggression into that. And throughout the book he has many trials and conversations that he has, and I just think that he becomes such a nuanced character, and he develops and goes through so much, and it is a very emotional ride, and it is by far one of my favorite books of this year. It is a book I would love to reread and own eventually. I am not very good at buying books, but it is definitely a book that I will treasure, and it's a book I think I will pass on to my children. It's just a book that I think means something very important, and I wish it was taught in schools. And it also really has a long conversation on interracial marriage and interracial relationships, which was something that I'd never really been exposed to as much. I have a biracial family, so for me the idea that people would frown upon people marrying other ethnicities never really came from me, especially from the black community. People clearly are racist sometimes against minorities, but I didn't necessarily see the minorities being upset marrying the majority, if that makes sense. So I was really perplexed by that, and it definitely made me think, but it has some powerful quotes and discussions around that. My second book is Driving by Starlight by Annette Dackerstein, and this is also a potent book dealing with prejudice and discrimination, and it is set in Saudi Arabia. It is an own voices novel written by a Saudi Arabian woman, and she actually wrote under a pseudonym. It follows Lena, who is the daughter of a political rebel who has been in prison for the last several years, and because of the laws restricting women, she has very little rights. So does her mother, because they can't do anything without male permission and guardian, even if that consists of being a small boy. And then her best friend is Michelle, and she is the daughter of a political advisor, one of the chief ministers of the government, and it really explores their friendship and how that interacts and how political choices and their futures and what options they have. And it is a heartbreaking and also very educational novel about what it is actually like to live in Saudi Arabia. It tore my heart to pieces in every possible way. It's set current day, and that's what makes it so much harder. Now going on to my historical fiction, this is A Smell of Other People's Houses, and this is set, I forgot to look it up, it's either in the 60s or 70s, I think it's in the 60s, 65 or so, in Alaska, and it follows these 4 characters who all lives interconnect but not really, and I love that. They each have an issue in their life, and from being pregnant to dealing with abuse, being invisible, and it's just such a potent novel. And it's called The Smell of Other People's Houses, which is a peculiar name indeed, and Bonnie Sue Hitchcock does such a beautiful job of weaving the imagery of smell and what it means. And if you are like me whatsoever, smell actually, I don't necessarily resonate with smell as much as a lot of other people, but it still means something. You still smell something, and those things mean something. And she does a great job of capturing that and telling us how smell matters to these people and what smells in their life. And I think that's a beautiful way of kind of showing and not telling, because she's telling us what smells are, but like it adds so much more, which we don't necessarily need the full physical description or emotional things, because we can tell what they're smelling. And the writing is also beautiful, and that is the smell of worlds colliding, because they don't actually come all together until the last chapter, which I loved. And actually seeing how all their stories weave together, and the minor and major characters are also all so important and beautiful, and I adored it. But our story will always be old and badly written, and it is still there, my own heart, cobbled together and a little worse for wear, but not all beat out. And that is still one of my favorite quotes of this year, and one that I hold on to a lot. And I have a whole review of this. It is not like a full depth review because I never planned on actually reviewing it, but I called it an ode, and I will probably do a review when I reread it because it is remarkable. My fourth book would be Girl in Translation by Jean Kwok. This is also an extraordinary, extraordinary novel. It follows the story of Kimberly Chang from grade 6 until grade 12, and she comes from China as an immigrant, and her life of living in utter poverty. She doesn't have heat, she doesn't have warm anything. They have to huddle around the stove to keep warm in the winter of New York, and it is heart-wrenching. It is historical fiction. It's set in the 1980s, I think, so it's not like well far back. The story is just heartbreaking, but so beautiful, and so much is explored. It's a book I didn't love as much when I first read it, but as time has gone on, I read it the first week of January, and it's been almost a year, and it matters way more to me now than it did then. And that's the test of a quality book. It is one that has stood the test of time in so much love and beauty, and it explores so many interesting and beautiful thought processes of what it means to grow up, what it means to make those choices, and what your life is supposed to be. And a quote from it is, "Sometimes our fate is so different from what we could have imagined." And the ending of the book is remarkably different than you would have expected from the beginning. I had no idea where the book was happening, and I adored it for that. And I adored its simplicity of just adding people. It felt very real, because you know how sometimes the characters only come in when they matter, but we have so many characters that are just interweaved, and stories that happen, and they don't happen in a cliche way. Last, and certainly not least, is I Darkened by Kiersten White. It is kind of an outlier in the series of kind of harsh realistic novels, because it is set in the 1400s, and it is based on the historical Vlad the Impaler, but as if he was a woman. And the reason I include it on this list is because it is historical fiction. It is not fantasy, although it is often characterized that way. And it is still a powerful, powerful book. It deals with many things in very realistic ways, despite the fact that it is very fictionalized as well. It deals with the difference between Christianity and Islam. It deals with the differences between the Eastern European and the Ottomans and their belief systems and their worlds, and dealing with a father who would let them be captives in order that he may still have power. I loved the characters. I loved the fact that they were all unique, and two of them are quite unlikable, and one of them is a crest of golden brightness. And it is just such a beautiful and lovely novel, and it follows them from when she is born until when they're in their mid-teens, and I love that kind of story. I would highly recommend it. And these are my top 5 YA books of 2018. I hope that you will join me as I continue to talk about my favorite books, because that just makes me really happy. Anyways, have a fantastic day and happy reading and writing, and let me know which was your favorite book of the year.